The research vessel drifted through the dead zone like a metal ghost. Commander High Soul stood at the observation window, her 3 eyes scanning the darkness. This sector had been forbidden for 3,000 years. The old record said a violent species once lived here, on a planet called Earth. They said these creatures destroyed themselves with their own weapons. "Commander, we are detecting a signal," her navigator called out. "It is coming from the 3rd planet." High Soul felt her chest tighten. The 3rd planet was Earth, dead Earth. Nothing should be transmitting from a dead world. "What kind of signal?" she asked. "A distress beacon. Old style, but still functional." High Soul made her decision quickly. "Take us closer. Activate all scanners." As the ship moved toward the blue and green planet, the crew grew silent. Their instruments showed something impossible. Cities, lights, atmosphere thick with oxygen and nitrogen, and life. Billions of life signs. "This cannot be real," High Soul whispered. "Earth died. Everyone knows this." But the sensors did not lie. Earth lived. The humans lived. On the planet below, Captain Quan Day stood in the command center of Seoul Station. He watched the alien ship approach on the displays. Humanity had detected the coalition vessel 3 days ago. 3 days to prepare for this moment. "They are scanning us," Lieutenant Rin Hana reported from her station. She was young, barely 30, but she had steady hands and a sharp mind. "Should we activate weapons?" "No," Quan Day said calmly. "We send them a message. Tell them we come in peace." Rin Hana typed rapidly. The message transmitted in 17 languages, including the ancient Coalition Standard tongue that Earth had decrypted from old ruins found on Mars. Aboard the Coalition ship, High Soul read the message with shock. The humans knew Coalition language. They knew about the galaxy beyond their world, and they were inviting her to talk. "Prepare a shuttle," High Soul ordered. "I will go down myself." Her crew protested. These were humans. The old files said they were dangerous, unpredictable, and violent. But High Soul was a scientist first. She needed to see this with her own eyes. The shuttle landed in a massive courtyard surrounded by tall buildings. Quan Day waited with a small team. He wore a simple military uniform, dark blue with silver markings. Next to him stood Rin Hana and Corporal Sung Il, a medic with kind eyes and quick smile. When High Soul stepped out of her shuttle, she was surprised. The humans were small, barely reaching her shoulder. They had no natural armor, no claws, no thick skin. They looked soft, fragile. "Welcome to Earth," Quan Day said in perfect Coalition standard. "We have waited a long time for this day." High Soul studied him carefully. "How are you alive? The records say Earth went silent 3,000 years ago. We thought you were extinct." Quan Day smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "We chose silence. We needed time to heal, time to grow, time to become better than we were." Over the next week, High Soul learned the truth. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself in a great war 3,000 years ago. Nuclear weapons had scarred the planet. Billions died. The survivors made a choice. They shut down all broadcasts to space. They focused inward. They rebuilt their world and unified their governments. They learned from their mistakes. "We studied the old Coalition ruins on Mars," Rin Hana explained during a tour of Earth's military academy. "We knew we were not alone. We knew someday you would return. So we prepared." But as High Soul explored Earth's cities and met its people, she grew more convinced that humans were not a threat. They were simply another species trying to survive. Yes, they had weapons. Yes, they had military forces. But they also had art, music, and philosophy. They valued peace. "I will recommend your integration into the Coalition," High Soul told Quan Day on her last day. "As a protected species, you will have trading rights and limited representation." Quan Day nodded slowly. protected species. That means you think we are weak. Not weak, High Soul corrected gently. Just small and new to the galaxy. The Coalition has many dangerous regions, species with natural weapons and armor. You would need protection. Before Quan Day could respond, alarms blared across Seoul Station. Rin Hana ran to a display screen, her face going pale. "Emergency transmission from Coalition space," she said. "A colony world is under attack." The message played for everyone to hear. Screams, weapons fire, and a panicked voice speaking Coalition standard. "This is Thresh 9 Colony. We are under attack by the Void Swarm. Repeat, the swarm is here. We have lost the eastern continent. Military forces are falling back. We need immediate assistance. If anyone can hear this, please help us. They are killing everyone." "They are." The transmission cut to static. High Soul felt her blood go cold. The Void Swarm, the unstoppable insectoid species that had consumed 17 worlds. No one could fight them successfully. The best strategy was evacuation and orbital bombardment. "How far is Thresh 9 from here?" Quan Day asked quietly. 17 light years, High Soul answered. "But Captain, this is not your concern. The Coalition military will respond." Quan Day turned to face her fully. His eyes were hard now, determined. "You said we would be part of the Coalition. You said we would have trading rights and representation." He stepped closer. "Does that membership start now or later?" High Soul hesitated. "Well, technically, the paperwork is not—" "Commander High Soul," Quan Day interrupted firmly. "There are people dying, children, families. I am offering Earth's military assistance. We may be small, we may be new, but we can fight, and we will fight. Tell your Coalition that humanity wants to help." Sung Il spoke up from behind. "Captain, we have 3 cruisers in orbit ready to deploy. The Helldivers Battalion can be combat ready in 6 hours. Rin Hana was already working her console. "I am pulling up everything we have on Void Swarm tactics and biology, sending it to all units now." Hyasol stared at these small, soft creatures. They had no idea what they were volunteering for. The swarm was death. The swarm was horror. The swarm could not be stopped by courage alone. But she saw something in Quan Day's eyes, something the Coalition had lost over 10,000 years of comfortable civilization. She saw fire. "I will contact the Coalition fleet," Hyasol finally said. "But I warn you, Captain, the Void Swarm is not like your ancient wars. They do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They consume everything." Quan Day smiled again, and this time it was cold. "Commander, humanity spent 3,000 years preparing for the moment we returned to the stars. We did not prepare to run. We prepared to stand. Now let us show the galaxy what humans do when someone needs help." As Earth's warships powered up their engines and soldiers loaded into transport craft, High Soul sent her message to Coalition Command. She told them that humanity was coming. She told them that these strange, small creatures from the myth world wanted to fight. She did not know if they would make any difference, but something in her chest felt warm. Something like hope. Maybe, just maybe, the old myths about humanity were wrong. Or maybe they were about to discover which parts were true. The Coalition fleet hung in orbit above Thresh 9 like metal giants. Admiral Quan Hyun commanded from the flagship, a massive dreadnought armed with plasma cannons that could crack continents. He watched the tactical display with growing frustration. The Void Swarm held the eastern continent, and they were spreading. "Human vessels approaching," his sensor officer announced. Quan Hyun turned to see 3 ships emerge from jump space. They were tiny compared to his dreadnought, sleek, simple, almost primitive in design. These were Earth's warships. "Hail them," he ordered. Captain Quan Day's face appeared on the screen. He wore combat armor now, black and gray with a closed helmet resting on his hip. "Admiral Quan Hyun," Quan Day said with a slight bow. "Earth forces reporting for duty. We request permission to join the ground operation." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. "Captain, your enthusiasm is noted. But this is not a training exercise. The Void Swarm is the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. Your forces should remain on your ships and observe. Learn our tactics." "With respect, Admiral, we did not travel 17 light years to watch." Quan Day's voice was polite but firm. "We came to fight. Where do you need us?" Quan Hyun studied the human carefully. Such confidence from such a small creature. It was almost amusing. "Very well. You may deploy with the third wave. Stay behind the Velkari shock troops. Follow their lead. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." "Understood," Quan Day said, though his eyes showed he had no intention of staying behind anyone. The human transports descended through the smoke-filled atmosphere. Inside one dropship, Lieutenant Rin Hana checked her equipment one final time. She carried enough explosives to level a city block. Her specialty was making things blow up at exactly the right moment. "Nervous?" Corporal Sung Il asked from across the hold. He was strapping medical supplies to his vest, far more than standard protocol required. "No," Rin Hana lied. "You?" Sung Il grinned. "Terrified. But that is normal, yes?" Around them, 200 human soldiers prepared for combat. They looked strange next to the massive coalition troops. No thick armor plating, no energy shields, just composite armor, kinetic weapons, and determination. Major Tae Min, their aerospace pilot, spoke over the comm. 30 seconds to landing zone. I am detecting heavy swarm activity. The coalition troops are pulling back to establish a defensive line." "Of course they are," Quan Day muttered. "That is what the tactics manual says to do." The dropship hit the ground hard. The ramp dropped, and humanity's soldiers rushed into hell. Thresh 9's eastern continent burned. The sky was black with smoke. Buildings collapsed under the weight of swarm biostructures. And everywhere were the insects. They moved like living nightmares. Each warrior was the size of a small vehicle, with acid glands that could melt through steel and mandibles that could cut through bone. They worked with perfect coordination, like cells in a single organism. The Velkari shock troops were falling back as planned. They formed a kill zone, a corridor of fire designed to funnel the enemy into a controlled space. It was standard coalition doctrine, safe, predictable. The humans ignored it completely. "Second squad with me," Quan Day ordered. "We are taking that building to the right. Rin Hana, I need it rigged in 10 minutes. "What building?" Rin Hana asked, scanning the ruins. "The one that is about to fall on 1,000 swarm warriors." The coalition officers watched in shock as the human soldiers split into small groups and moved into the urban ruins. They did not form a defensive line. They moved like water, flowing through destroyed streets and collapsed buildings. They set ambushes. They used the terrain. They fought dirty. Rin Hana reached the building Quan Dai had indicated. It was a shopping complex, half collapsed and surrounded by swarm forces. She studied the structure with a professional eye. "Sung Il, I need 5 minutes without interruption," she said calmly. "You have it." The medic raised his rifle and began firing at approaching warriors. His shots were precise, controlled. Each bullet found a weak point in the swarm armor. Rin Hana worked quickly. She placed charges at key support points. This was not about brute force. This was about leverage, physics, understanding exactly where to apply pressure to bring down tons of concrete and steel. Above the battlefield, Major Tae Min flew his fighter through the smoke. Coalition pilots followed strict engagement protocols. They maintained formation. They flew in predictable patterns. Tae Min did none of these things. His fighter twisted and rolled through the air in ways that made coalition flight officers physically ill. He used the atmosphere itself as a weapon, creating shock waves and sonic booms that disrupted swarm flying forms. "How is that human still alive?" a coalition pilot asked over the open channel. Those maneuvers should have torn his ship apart. Humans, someone else muttered. They are insane. On the ground, the situation was getting worse. The swarm had identified the coalition defensive line and was massing for a major assault. Quan Hyun prepared to give the retreat order. They would fall back to the spaceport, evacuate the remaining civilians. Then orbital bombardment would sterilize the continent. "Admiral," his tactical officer said urgently, "the humans have not retreated. They are advancing into swarm territory." "What? Order them back immediately." But the humans were not listening to orders. They had found a choke point, a narrow valley between two sections of the city. The swarm was using it as a main route to bring reinforcements forward. "This is it," Quan Day told his team. "We hold here. Nothing gets through." "Captain, there are thousands of them," one soldier pointed out. "Then we better not miss." For 16 hours, 200 human soldiers held that valley. They fought in shifts, rotating positions so no one exhausted themselves. When ammunition ran low, they used captured swarm bioweapons. When those ran out, they used sharpened metal bars and rocks. Sung-il moved through the fighting like a ghost. He pulled wounded soldiers back from the front. He treated coalition troops who had been cut off from their units. He worked with calm efficiency, even as acid burned through his armor in places. "Why do you not retreat?" a Velkari soldier asked him, while Sung-il treated a deep wound. "You will die here." Sung-il smiled. "Maybe, but while I am alive, you are alive. That seems like a good trade." Rin Hana detonated her charges at hour 12. The shopping complex came down exactly as she planned, creating an avalanche of rubble that buried a full swarm assault wave. The enemy had to root around it, buying precious time. By hour 16, coalition reinforcements arrived. Fresh troops poured into the valley to relieve the humans. When the soldiers finally pulled back, they looked like they had fought through fire itself. Armor scorched, weapons barely functional. But they walked out with their heads high. Quan Day made his report to Admiral Quan Hyun. 200 deployed, 197 walking back. 3 wounded but stable. Mission accomplished, Admiral. Quan Hyun stared at the human. Only 3 casualties after 16 hours against the swarm. It was impossible. His own Velkari troops had lost 40% in half that time. "You disobeyed my orders," the Admiral said slowly. "You were to stay behind the shock troops." "Yes, Admiral. We disobeyed. Do you want us to leave?" Quan Hyun was silent for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. "No, Captain. I want you to teach my officers what you just did down there." The battle for Thresh 9 continued for 3 more days. With human tactics spreading through the coalition forces, the tide began to turn. Soldiers learned to use terrain. They learned flexibility. They learned that sometimes the manual was wrong. When the last swarm warrior fell, the colony was saved. Damaged, but saved. But the victory celebration was brief. Coalition reconnaissance drones had traced the swarm's retreat path. They had found the source, a fortress world deep in hostile space. The swarm called it the furnace. Temperature readings showed 700 degrees at the surface. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species. It was a world of fire and death. The coalition had no way to assault it. They prepared to evacuate 12 nearby systems and write them off as lost. In the human ship, Quan Dai studied the data on the furnace with Rin Hana and Sung-il. "They are abandoning those systems without a fight," Sung-il said quietly. "Millions of people. They cannot survive on that world," Rin Hana pointed out. "It is beyond their capabilities." Quan Dai looked at his 2 officers. Then he smiled. "It is beyond coalition capabilities, but we have trained in worse. Sung-il, you did survival training in the Sahara, yes? For 6 months. And Rin Hana, you certified for deep-sea demolition work? At depths that would crush coalition armor like paper." Quan Day pulled up a communication channel to Earth Command. "This is Captain Quan Day. I am requesting deployment of the Helldivers Battalion and full environmental assault gear. We have a world to invade." On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Quan Hyun received the human request with disbelief. They wanted to assault the furnace. They thought they could fight where no other species could survive. He thought about denying permission. But then he remembered 200 humans holding a valley against impossible odds. He remembered tactics that broke every rule but worked anyway. Maybe humanity was not just small and soft. Maybe they were something else entirely. Maybe they were what the galaxy needed. "Permission granted," he transmitted back. "But Captain Quan Day, do not make me regret this." "No promises, Admiral," Quan Day replied, "but we will make the swarm regret it." The Coalition War Council gathered in the Great Hall on the capital world. Hundreds of species represented, thousands of years of military tradition. And standing before them was General Su Rin of Earth, asking permission to do the impossible. "The furnace cannot be assaulted," Counselor Mevra stated flatly. The reptilian diplomat gestured at the holographic display. 700 degrees surface temperature, crushing atmospheric pressure, toxic air. "Our best troops would survive perhaps 10 minutes in combat armor." General Su Rin listened patiently. She was older than the soldiers deployed at Thresh 9, with gray in her hair and scars on her hands from decades of service. She waited until the council finished explaining why her plan would fail. "Counselor Mevra is correct," she said calmly. "Coalition troops cannot fight there, but human troops can. We have the equipment, we have the training, and we have the will." "You are asking us to let you commit suicide," another counselor said. "For what purpose?" Su Rin's eyes hardened. "To save 12 systems, to stop the swarm before they consume more worlds. Is that not purpose enough?" Admiral Quan Hyun stood from his seat. "I have fought beside humans. I have seen what they can do. If General Su Rin says her forces can operate on the furnace, I believe we should let them try." The vote was close, but it passed. 3 weeks later, the human fleet arrived at the furnace. 2,000 soldiers aboard transport ships. Colonel Jin Woo commanded the ground forces, a broad-shouldered man with a calm voice and eyes that missed nothing. He stood in the briefing room aboard the flagship, addressing his battalion commanders. The hologram showed the furnace rotating slowly, a red and black nightmare of a world. "We are going to do something unprecedented," Jin Woo said. "We are going to invade their home. The swarm has never faced an enemy in their own environment. They think they are safe there. We are going to prove them wrong." Lieutenant Rin Hana raised her hand. She had been promoted after Thresh 9 and now commanded the engineering corps. "What is our primary objective, Colonel?" "Find the Hive Queen, kill her, destroy their capacity to reproduce." Jin Woo zoomed in on a section of the surface. "Intelligence suggests the main hive is here, in the equatorial region. We insert via drop pods, fight to the hive core, plant tactical nuclear devices, and extract." There was silence in the room. Then Sung-il, now promoted to captain, spoke up. "Nuclear weapons. The Coalition banned those 3,000 years ago." Jin Woo smiled grimly. "Good thing we are not Coalition then. Humans never forgot how to split atoms, and this is exactly the kind of target that requires it." Dr. Yun Na, a xenobiologist embedded with the military, pulled up swarm biological data. She was young, but brilliant, with quick hands and a mind that worked like a supercomputer. "The swarm breeds in extreme heat," she explained. "Their larvae require temperatures above 600 degrees. That is why they chose the furnace. But it also means concentrated population density. One well-placed explosion could eliminate millions." Major Tae Min reviewed the atmospheric combat data. His fighter squadron would provide air support, but flying in that atmosphere would be brutal. The air pressure is going to make standard flight nearly impossible. We are going to have to modify our approach vectors. Can it be done? Jin Woo asked. Tae Min grinned. Colonel, we flew atmospheric combat in Jupiter's upper clouds during training. This will be difficult, but since when has that stopped us? The drop pods launched like meteors. 2,000 human soldiers in specialized heat-resistant armor fell through the furnace's atmosphere. The Coalition fleet watched from orbit, sensors tracking every pod. Inside her pod, Sergeant Mi Young felt the temperature climbing. Her armor's cooling systems worked overtime, pumping liquid through tubes that covered her body. It was like being inside an oven. But she had trained for this. 6 months in Death Valley, another 3 in volcanic test chambers. Her body knew how to manage heat. The pods hit the surface and cracked open. Instantly, the soldiers were in hell. The ground glowed with heat. The air shimmered. And everywhere were swarm structures, towers of bioresin that reached toward the black sky. "Move fast!" Colonel Jin Woo ordered over the comm. "Our armor can handle this for 12 hours. After that, the cooling systems will fail. We need to be done before then." The humans moved in combat teams, flowing through the hostile landscape. The swarm emerged from underground tunnels, confused by these invaders. How could soft-flesh creatures survive here? This was impossible. But humans specialized in doing impossible things. Captain Sung-il led a medical team through the fighting. When soldiers took damage, he worked quickly. His hands steady despite the temperature, despite the chaos. He had a gift for staying calm when everything went wrong. "Captain, we have a soldier with heat exhaustion," a medic called. Sung-il was there in seconds. He checked vitals, administered fluids, and got the soldier back on their feet in minutes. "Drink more water. Keep your cooling systems at maximum. You will be fine." Lieutenant Rin Hana's engineering teams moved through the hive structures, mapping as they went. She noticed patterns in the architecture, weak points, places where a well-placed explosive could bring down entire sections. "Colonel, I am identifying primary support columns," she reported. "If we take out 6 specific points, we can collapse the upper hive levels into the breeding chambers below." "How much explosive do you need?" "For this? Conventional weapons will not do it. I need the nuclear devices planted at these exact coordinates." She transmitted the data. Jin Woo studied the locations, deep in the hive, heavily defended. "Understood. I will get teams there." Major Tae Min's fighter squadron screamed through the furnace's atmosphere. The pressure pushed against their wings, trying to tear them apart. But human aerospace engineering had prepared for this. Their fighters flexed and adapted, using the dense air for impossible maneuvers. Swarm flyers rose to meet them. Bioorganic creatures with acid sacs and ripping claws. The aerial combat was brutal. Fast. Tae Min rolled his fighter inverted, lined up a shot, and fired. The swarm flyer exploded into fragments. "This is Reaper to all units," he called. "The sky is ours. Ground teams have clear support." 6 hours into the operation, the human forces reached the hive core. It was a cathedral of living chitin and resin, and at the center, massive and pulsing, was the hive queen. She was the size of a building. Her abdomen constantly produced eggs, thousands per hour. Around her, worker swarm tended to the larvae and prepared them for their transformation into warriors. Colonel Jin Woo stood at the entrance to the chamber with Captain Kwon-dae, who had volunteered to join the mission. Together, they watched the impossible target. "That is what we have to kill," Jin Woo said quietly. "Lieutenant Rin Hana," Kwon-dae called over the comm, "tell me you have those charges ready." "Already planting them," came the reply. Rin Hana was deep in the hive structure, placing nuclear devices at the exact coordinates she had identified. Her hands worked quickly, precisely. Each device was small, tactical yield, but together they would create a chain reaction that would tear the hive apart from the inside. The swarm realized what was happening. Warriors poured into the corridors, trying to stop the human invaders. The fighting became desperate, hand-to-hand in some places, humans using every trick they knew. Sung-il found himself cut off from his unit, surrounded by swarm warriors. He had one rifle, half a magazine of ammunition, and a medical kit. Not ideal. "Well," he said to himself, "this is not good." He fired carefully. Each shot counted. When the rifle clicked empty, he threw it at the nearest warrior and pulled out a medical laser, normally used for cauterizing wounds. At full power, it could burn through chitin. He survived. Barely. When reinforcements found him, he was sitting on top of 3 dead swarm warriors, calmly treating a burn on his arm. "Captain Sung-il," a soldier said with awe, "you are insane." "No," Sung-il replied, "just really good at not dying." Dr. Yun Na worked from the mobile command post, analyzing swarm behavior in real time. She noticed something strange. The swarm was fighting hard, yes. But they were also trying to retreat, not from the humans, from something else. "Colonel Jin Woo," she transmitted urgently, "I am detecting unusual behavior. The swarm is showing signs of fear, but not of us." "Fear of what?" "I do not know. But I think the furnace is not their final destination. I think they are running from something." Jin Woo filed that information away. Mystery for later. Right now, they had a mission to complete. At hour 11, with their cooling systems beginning to fail, Lieutenant Rin Hana activated the final nuclear device. "Charges are set. I am initiating the countdown. We have 10 minutes to reach minimum safe distance." "All units, fall back to extraction point," Jin Woo ordered. "Move fast. Move now." The humans retreated in good order, fighting a running battle with pursuing swarm forces. Dropships descended through the hell atmosphere, scooping up soldiers and racing back toward orbit. Major Tae Min's squadron covered the extraction, his fighters weaving through swarm flyers with desperate intensity. "Come on," he muttered. "Get to the ships. Get to the ships." At 8 minutes, the last human soldier was aboard. The transports burned their engines, clawing for altitude. At 10 minutes, Lieutenant Rin Hana's nuclear devices detonated in perfect sequence. The explosions rippled through the hive structure exactly as she had calculated. Support columns vaporized. Upper levels collapsed. The chain reaction spread through breeding chambers, incinerating millions of larvae. The hive queen died without ever understanding what had killed her. From orbit, the Coalition fleet watched the surface of the furnace light up with fire. When the explosions cleared, the primary hive was gone. Just a crater of molten rock. Colonel Jin Woo made his report. 2,000 deployed. 1,847 returned. Mission successful. The furnace is neutralized. General Surin received the news with quiet pride. They had done it. Humans had invaded a world that should have been impossible. And they had won. Admiral Kwon Hyun approached her on the observation deck. "I owe you an apology, General. When you first proposed this, I thought it was madness." "It was madness," Surin agreed. "But sometimes madness is what wins wars." The Admiral looked at the furnace rotating below. "My government is requesting that Earth establish a military academy. To train Coalition forces in your methods, will you consider it?" "We will. But Admiral, there is something you should know. Dr. Yun Na discovered something during the battle. The swarm was not attacking the galaxy. They were running from something that frightened them more than we do." Kwon Hyun felt a chill run through his body. "Running from what?" "We do not know yet. But I suggest we find out. Before it finds us." 6 months after the furnace, humanity was no longer a myth. Earth soldiers served on every major Coalition military operation. The Terran Shock Infantry became the most requested force in the galaxy. Where others saw impossible missions, humans saw opportunities. Ambassador Huan Jie represented Earth in the Coalition capital. He was a diplomat by training but had the soul of a warrior. He understood that peace required strength, and strength required respect. The Council wishes to award Earth full membership status, Counselor Mevra told him during a private meeting. No longer protected species, full voting rights, full integration. Huan Jie should have been pleased, but he heard something in the counselor's voice. Hesitation. I sense there is more to this conversation. Mevra shifted uncomfortably. Some of the older council members have been researching Earth's history. They found sealed records, very old records. How old? 3,000 years. Huan Jie felt his stomach tighten. I see. And what do these records say? That humanity did not simply go silent 3,000 years ago. You were quarantined, deliberately isolated by the coalition of that era. Mevra pulled up ancient files, encrypted and stamped with security markers. There was a war, Ambassador. A short war, but a brutal one. The holographic display showed old battle reports. Human ships, primitive by current standards, fighting against a 50-species alliance, chemical rockets against energy weapons, nuclear bombs against plasma cannons, and somehow, impossibly, the humans were winning. Our ancestors feared you, Mevra continued quietly. You fought with a ferocity they had never seen. You refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. You used tactics that ignored all rules of civilized warfare. So they made a decision. They isolated your world. They hoped that after a few thousand years, humanity would evolve beyond violence. But we did not, Huan Jie said. No. You simply learned to control it better. The ambassador studied the reports carefully. His ancestors had fought the entire galaxy and nearly won with Stone Age technology by comparison. It was terrifying. It was also magnificent. Who else knows about this? He asked. The information leaked 3 days ago. Now everyone knows. Across coalition space, fear spread like disease. Humanity had been quarantined once before. Some species demanded it happen again. Protests erupted on a dozen worlds. Humans are too dangerous. Humans cannot be trusted. Humans will destroy us all. On Earth, Captain Sol Yun worked in Intelligence Division. She was sharp, analytical, and had a gift for seeing patterns others missed. When the quarantine files leaked, she began investigating deeper mysteries. There is something wrong with the timeline, she told her team. The Coalition says they quarantined Earth 3,000 years ago, but human archaeological records show Coalition presence on Mars dating back 7,000 years. What happened in those 4,000 years? Her team dug through ancient ruins, old databases, and fragments of language. They found references to something called the Architects, beings of immense power who had visited Earth long ago, beings who had created life on worlds across the galaxy. Look at this, one analyst said, pulling up a document. This is from an ancient human temple in Egypt. It describes gods who came from the stars, gods who built the pyramids, gods who tested humanity. Sol Yun compared the descriptions to coalition records. The dates matched, the locations matched. The architects visited Earth. They met ancient humans, and then they left. Why? She found her answer in a classified coalition file that should not have existed. It was a report from 7,000 years ago, filed by an architect probe. Subject species, humanity. Classification, uncontrolled variable. Recommendation, quarantine and monitor. Reason, species demonstrates unprecedented adaptive capacity and aggressive expansion tendencies. If left unchecked, will dominate galactic civilization within 2,000 cycles. Proposed action, delay development until evolution reduces violent tendencies. Sol Yun read the report 3 times to make sure she understood. The architects had not visited Earth to help humanity. They had visited to stop humanity. And when the coalition broke quarantine 3,000 years ago and humanity fought back, the architects had stepped in again. But why had they not destroyed Earth completely? What made them hesitate? She kept digging. And then she found something that made her blood run cold. Recent sensor logs from the edge of Coalition space. Ships, massive ships, designs that matched architect technology, and they were heading toward the core worlds. Sol Yun ran to Ambassador Huan Jie's office without bothering to make an appointment. "Ambassador, we have a situation. The architects are coming back." Before Huan could respond, alarms blared across the Coalition capital. Emergency broadcasts filled every screen. A distress call from a core world, screaming, chaos, and then silence. The architect ships appeared in orbit above Coalition worlds without warning. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply began sterilizing planets with beams of energy that broke matter down at the molecular level. The Coalition fleet responded with everything they had: plasma cannons, fusion missiles, quantum disruptors, the weapons that had kept peace for 10,000 years. They did nothing. The architect shields absorbed every attack without even flickering. In the War Council, panic set in. Counselor Rinva Thos stood and pointed at Ambassador Huan Jie. "This is humanity's fault. The architects have returned because you were unleashed. They are cleansing the galaxy of our mistake." "That is not logical," General Su Rin said calmly. She had been summoned to the capital when the attacks began. "If they wanted only Earth destroyed, they would attack Earth. They are attacking everyone. We are all targets." Admiral Quan Hyun pulled up tactical data. 3 core worlds sterilized. 5 more under attack. Our weapons are useless. We have no defense. He looked at the humans in the room. "Unless you have another miracle." Captain Sol Yun stepped forward. "I have been studying architect technology. I found something in their old databases, something they left behind on Mars thousands of years ago." She displayed the file on the hologram. It was a language database, millions of entries describing every species the architects had ever encountered, and there, marked in red, was Earth. "They have extensive files on humanity," Sol Yun explained. "More than any other species, hundreds of thousands of observations, behavioral analysis, tactical predictions. And at the bottom of every file is the same notation: primary threat." "Why would ancient humans be a threat?" Counselor Mevra asked. "You had no technology, no space travel." "We had something else," Huan Jie said quietly. "We had the one thing the architects could not predict or control. We had chaos, creativity, the ability to throw away every rule and still win." Dr. Yun Na had arrived from Earth with Colonel Jin Wu and a battalion of soldiers. She studied the architect data with fascination. "This is incredible. They have been trying to classify humanity for thousands of years. Every model they build fails. Every prediction is wrong. We are the variable that breaks their equations." "Can we use that?" Admiral Quan Hyun asked. "Can we weaponize our unpredictability?" Jin Wu smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Admiral, humanity has been weaponizing chaos since we discovered fire. The question is not can we. The question is how fast." Captain Quan Day had been studying the architect ship movements. "They are moving in perfect formation, mathematical precision. They are machines, not living beings. They think like machines. They expect resistance to follow patterns." "Then we do not follow patterns," Lieutenant Rin Hana said. She had been promoted to major after the furnace. "We do what we do best. We improvise." Sol Yun pulled up more architect data. "I found their central processing nexus. It is a Dyson sphere located at the edge of the galaxy. They call it the Forge. Every architect ship is connected to it. That is their hive mind, their central intelligence." "Then that is what we hit," General Su Rin said. "We go to the source. We attack the Forge itself." The Coalition counselors stared at her. "That is suicide. The Forge is the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. No fleet has ever penetrated its outer ring." "No Coalition fleet," Huan Jie corrected. But then we are not a coalition fleet. We are human, and humans specialize in doing impossible things. Admiral Kwan Hyun calculated the odds. They were terrible. But doing nothing meant extinction. How many ships can Earth provide? Every ship we have, Su-Rin replied. Every soldier, every pilot. This is what we built our military for. This moment right here. Captain Sung-il prepared his medical teams aboard the transport vessels. He knew the casualties would be heavy, but he also knew that humans had survived worse. They had survived nuclear war. They had survived the furnace. They would survive this. Major Tae-min ran flight simulations for his pilots. The Forge's outer ring would be a nightmare of defensive systems, energy fields, automated weapons, and architect ships by the thousands. This is going to make the furnace look easy, he told his squadron. Good, one pilot replied. I was getting bored. Sergeant Mi Young loaded equipment aboard dropships. If they somehow made it past the Forge's defenses, ground teams would need to penetrate the sphere itself, plant a virus, disrupt the architect network. She did not know if it was possible, but she would try anyway. That was the human way. Try anyway. The combined fleet prepared to depart. Earthships, coalition vessels, species that had feared each other days ago now fought alongside each other. Because the architects had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humans were the only threat. But humanity had taught the galaxy something important. How to fight when victory was impossible. How to stand when defeat was certain. How to be more than survival instincts and mathematical probability. How to be brave. Ambassador Huan Jie made one final broadcast before the fleet departed. The architects believe they are gods. They believe they can decide which species lives and which dies. But we are going to teach them something that humanity learned 3,000 years ago. Gods can bleed, and if they can bleed, they can die. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying the hopes of 1,000 species. They were heading into fire, into impossible odds. But then, humans had been doing that since they first looked at the stars and decided to reach them. The combined fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the galaxy. Before them hung the Forge, a sphere so massive it enclosed an entire star. Energy crackled across its surface. Millions of automated defense platforms orbited in perfect geometric patterns. And between the fleet and their target waited 3,000 architect warships. Fleet Admiral Quan Day stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship. He had been promoted from captain after the Furnace campaign. Now he commanded the largest military force Earth had ever assembled. 50 human ships, 200 coalition vessels, and one desperate plan. Admiral Kwan Hyun, your fleet will provide heavy bombardment, he ordered. Target the outer defense platforms. Make them think you are the main assault. The coalition admiral nodded. And what will your ships do? Something stupid. Quan Day smiled. We are going to fly through the defensive grid at maximum speed and punch a hole in the Forge's outer shell. That is suicide. Probably. But it might work. And right now, might is better than nothing. The battle began with a wave of coalition plasma fire. Energy beams capable of cracking moons slammed into the Forge's defenses. The architect platforms responded with mathematical precision, calculating trajectories and forming overlapping fields of fire, exactly as expected. While the architects focused on the coalition fleet, human ships accelerated to attack speed. Major Tae-min led the fighter squadrons, his voice calm over the comm. All wings, follow my lead. Tight formation. No fancy flying yet. Save that for when things get interesting. When will things get interesting? A young pilot asked. About 30 seconds. The architect defenses detected the human approach and adjusted. Energy beams lanced through space, precise and deadly. 3 human fighters vanished in balls of fire, but the rest kept coming, weaving through the defensive grid with desperate speed. Tae-min's instruments screamed warnings. His fighters' shields were failing. His armor was burning. But he could see the target now. a weak point in the forge's outer shell where thermal stress had created microscopic fractures. "This is Reaper to all units. I have the target. Initiating attack run." He dove toward the forge's surface, his fighter shaking from atmospheric pressure. Behind him, the squadron followed. They fired missiles, kinetic rounds, and everything they had. The weapons struck the same point, again and again, exploiting the fracture. The outer shell cracked. "We have a breach!" Tae-min shouted. "All dropships, you have your opening! Go, go, go!" Transport vessels carrying ground assault teams raced through the gap. Inside were Colonel Jin Woo's soldiers, ready for what came next, and leading the special operations team was Captain Sol Yun, who carried the virus that could stop the architects, assuming they survived long enough to upload it. The transports crashed through the forge's inner atmosphere and deployed their forces. 2,000 human soldiers and 500 coalition special forces hit the ground inside a technological nightmare. Machines everywhere, automated defenses, and at the center, the Architect Prime, the central intelligence that controlled everything. "Move fast," Jinwoo ordered. "Our mission timer is 30 minutes. After that, the outer defenses will recalibrate and seal the breach. If we are still inside when that happens, we are not getting out." Major Rin Hanna led the engineering teams forward. Her job was to clear a path to the Prime's core. She carried enough explosives to level a city, and she planned to use every gram. "Sergeant Mi Young, I need covering fire," she called. Mi Young's heavy weapons team set up positions and began firing at automated sentries. The machines were fast, accurate, and endless. But humans had trained for this. They had trained for every nightmare scenario imaginable. And this was just one more nightmare. Captain Sung-il moved through the chaos with his medical teams. When soldiers fell, he was there. He worked with calm efficiency, treating wounds under fire, pulling the injured to safety, and getting them back in the fight when possible. "Captain, we have a soldier with severe burns," a medic called. Sung-il assessed the damage quickly. "Stabilize him here. He is going back to the transport. Good work, soldier. You fought well." The wounded man smiled despite his pain. "Did we win yet?" "Not yet, but we will." Deep in the Forge's systems, Dr. Yun Na analyzed the architect code in real time. She was aboard one of the ships in orbit, feeding information to Sol Yun's ground team. "I am detecting a pattern in their defensive responses. They are adapting to our tactics, but there is a delay. 0.7 seconds. That is their processing time." "Can we exploit that?" Sol Yun asked. "Yes. If you can overload them with contradictory data, make them choose between multiple impossible scenarios, their logic systems will freeze trying to calculate the optimal response." Sol Yun understood immediately. "We give them human chaos. We do things that make no tactical sense, things that break every rule." She transmitted orders to all teams. "New strategy. Stop following standard assault doctrine. I want random movements, unpredictable attacks. Make them think we are insane." And humans were very good at looking insane. Colonel Jin Woo's forces split into smaller groups that moved with no apparent coordination. They attacked from unexpected angles. They retreated when they should have advanced. They advanced when they should have retreated. To the architects, it looked like pure chaos, which was exactly the point. The Architect Prime tried to calculate optimal responses, but every model it built was wrong. The humans did not follow patterns. They did not repeat tactics. They invented new strategies on the fly, adapting faster than the Prime could process. For the first time in its existence, the Architect Prime felt something approximating confusion. "We are approaching the core," Sol Yun reported. She could see it now. A massive sphere of crystalline computing substrate, pulsing with energy. "Rin Hanna, I need a way inside." Major Rin Hanna studied the structure. It was beautiful in a way. Perfect engineering, perfect design, which meant it had perfect weaknesses. "There," she said, pointing. "That thermal exhaust port. It is small, but if I can get a charge inside, it will create a chain reaction through the cooling systems." How small? About the size of my fist. Sul Yun looked at the port. It was maybe 2 meters across, surrounded by defensive turrets, and positioned at the end of a narrow corridor filled with automated sentries. That is impossible, a coalition officer said. Good thing we are human then, Sul Yun replied. Impossible is what we do before breakfast. Major Tae Min's fighter squadron had been holding off architect ships in orbit, but when Sol Yun called for support, he did not hesitate. This is Reaper. I am coming in. Clear me a path. Major, you cannot fit a fighter through that corridor, someone protested. Watch me. Tae Min dove his fighter into the forge's interior, rolling and spinning through impossibly tight spaces, his wings scraped against walls. His shields sparked and died, but he kept flying, kept moving, kept defying every law of physics and common sense. He lined up on the thermal exhaust port, weapons locked, distance calculating. He had one shot. Target acquired, Fox 3. The missile launched, streaked down the corridor, and disappeared into the thermal exhaust port. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the forge shook. Rin Hana's prediction was correct. The explosion traveled through the cooling systems, creating cascading failures. The Architect Prime's perfect structure began to crack. We have an opening, Sol Yun shouted. All teams with me! They raced into the core chamber. The Architect Prime was there, a vast intelligence made of light and mathematics. It spoke for the first time, its voice like crystal shattering. Why do you resist? You are biological, temporary, flawed. We are eternal, perfect, logical. Sol Yun pulled out the virus drive. It was a simple device by architect standards, but it contained something the architects could not process: human history, all of it, every war, every peace, every triumph and every tragedy, every contradiction, every impossible choice. You think you are perfect? Sul Yun said. Then try to understand this. She uploaded the drive. The Architect Prime attempted to process the data. It tried to classify humanity, to fit them into logical categories: violent or peaceful, rational or emotional, predictable or chaotic. But humans were all of these things, and none of them, simultaneously. The Prime's processing systems overloaded. How could a species be so contradictory? How could they destroy cities with nuclear fire and then rebuild them more beautiful than before? How could they fight wars for centuries and then shake hands and become allies? How could they be capable of such cruelty and such kindness? It did not make sense. It could not make sense. And the Architect Prime, built on pure logic, could not function without sense. The entire Architect network crashed, not destroyed, just stopped. Frozen in a philosophical loop, trying to answer an impossible question. What is humanity? All teams fall back, Jin Woo ordered. The mission is complete. Get to the transports. The humans retreated in good order, fighting their way back through automated defenses that were now moving sluggishly without central coordination. They reached the transports with minutes to spare. Major Tae Min covered the extraction, his damaged fighter barely holding together. Come on, come on! Everyone out! Move faster! The last soldier boarded. The transports launched, racing back through the breach in the forge's outer shell. Behind them, the great sphere went dark. The architect ships in orbit stopped moving, just floating, waiting for orders that would never come. The coalition fleet held their fire, watching in amazement. Did we win? Admiral Kwan Hyun asked. Fleet Admiral Kwan Dae studied the sensor readings. They are not attacking. They are not moving. They are just thinking, trying to understand what we are. Will they attack again? Eventually, maybe, when they figure out how to process the data. But that could take years, centuries, or maybe never. He smiled. Humans broke their programming. We showed them something that cannot be calculated or predicted. Free will. The victory was quiet. No explosions, no dramatic deaths. just machines going still as they contemplated the impossible. The fleet returned to Coalition space as heroes. Earth was granted full membership with honors. The Terran shock infantry became legendary, and across the galaxy, species that had once called humans myths now called them allies. A memorial was built on the furnace. 153 human soldiers had died in that battle. Their names were carved in stone, in every Coalition language with an inscription. They called us myths, legends from a dead world. But when the fires came, Earth's children walked into the flames, and the galaxy learned that some myths refused to die. 1 year later, Admiral Quan Day stood on a hill overlooking Seoul. Beside him was Admiral Quan Hyun, the Coalition officer who had once doubted humanity. "Your people continue to surprise us," the alien said. "We thought we knew what warriors looked like. But you showed us something different." "What is that?" Quan Day asked. "That warriors are not born from strength or armor or natural weapons. They are born from will, from the refusal to quit, from the decision to stand even when falling is easier." Quan Day nodded slowly. "We learned that the hard way. 3,000 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves. We had to choose what kind of species we wanted to be. We chose to be better. But we never forgot how to fight when fighting was necessary. Will you fight again? When the architects finish their calculations? If we must." Quan Day looked up at the stars. "But maybe we taught them something. Maybe they will learn what we learned. That perfection is not the absence of flaws. It is the choice to be better, despite them. And if they do not learn," Quan Day smiled, "then we will teach them again. Humans are very good teachers. We have been teaching the universe lessons since we first looked at the stars and decided they were not gods, just destinations." In the sky above, Earth's ships patrolled alongside Coalition vessels. Partners now, equals. The ancient myths had become living legends, and the galaxy was better for it. Because sometimes the universe does not need perfection. Sometimes it needs courage. Sometimes it needs chaos. Sometimes it needs someone willing to walk into the fire and refuse to burn. Sometimes it needs humans.